All right, welcome everyone to this evening's happy hour. We'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and the community and the country that we live, work, and play on. We extend that respect to elders past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Indigenous that are here with us today. And whoopsie, I'm just going to meet a couple of other people joining us. Sorry, I'm just trying to do a million things at once. But welcome. I'm about to introduce Dan Sims, who is our happy hour icon for this evening. But how happy hour works if you're joining us for the first time or for the 15th time. If you want to ask Dan any questions throughout the evening, please just put up your hand on the chat on Zoomy Zoom and we will throw over to you. If you want to take a second and type it out, you can pop it in the chat box. I can read it out to Dan as well. So there's a couple different options, then we'll open it up to the floor tonight. But I would love to introduce Dan Sims, who is Chair of Wine Victoria and also works for Common State. He's had an amazing career, which is so exciting, and I can't wait to hear more about it. And I think anyone that has had the luck of joining us at the Victorian Rootlings Field Day got to really know about Dan and his marketing expertise. So Dan, welcome to Happy Hour.
Thanks, Jenna. Thanks, everybody. Great to be here.
Now, how did you get involved in the wine industry?
Oh, I think, like anyone, I think it was a start of. I was in hospitality first. I sort of finished school and was just working in some, very dodgy cafe, and then got to a better place and just started working in that. Going, actually, I really quite like this. And at the time, the restaurant that I was working at had actually a lot of hospitality professionals. I used to work at a very famous Melbourne institution restaurant, which probably no one's ever heard of here, called the Latin, which was a very institutional venue at the time, and they were really great. And they sort of took me under their wing, and I was asking them about wine and going, what is this thing about wine? I don't quite understand it. What is it? Where do I start? What's the difference? Red, white, whatever. We didn't really have a lot of wine in our family. I had access to it. So then I think they just took me under their wing, Italian family, sat down at tables, try this, try this. And it kind of got me hooked, I think. And from there, it was pretty much a case of working into sort of a bit more into the city, hospitality, and then with a bit of a trip to Margaret River, I drove over to the Nullarbor and went to Margaret River and started discovering it that way. And then really it was working in hospitality and restaurants, I think. And then it just got hooked, right? And I was lucky enough to work with some great people and some great restaurants. It was Punch Lane back in the day and Walter's Wine Bar that had an amazing wine program. And there with the time it was very early days in terms of that evolving wine industry, in particular around Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, that type of thing. So there was a real camaraderie element to it. But yeah, like I mean, when I started out, there was no such thing as Wesset, really, and there was other wine courses, but I ended up learning up the old school way of tasting, reading, and listening was the three main mantras of those things. So, but yeah, I just got hooked and traveled and got fascinated, just with the world of wine, and it got to meld two of my favorite things of travel and food and hospitality. I think it's just it sucks you in though, doesn't it?
It really does. And then obviously you kind of moved from being customer facing, hospitality facing. Tell us about you like the next stage of your career where you moved into, I wouldn't say it was more of a corporate role, but
Oh,
corporate adjacent?
oh, I don't know. So I suppose my career was great. Like I worked in frontline hospitality as a sommelier. Probably the last time I worked in a restaurant was at 15 in Melbourne. Again, that's how old I was, which is the Jamie Oliver restaurant. And I learned so much there. It was fascinating because, um, again, high profile TV, all that type of thing. I learned so much about the media, the good and the bad, about media during that project. And that's probably going back about 15, almost 20 years now. And then from there, I started consulting to restaurants. I was writing wine list, building wine programs. So it really was the sort of the start of that kick sommelier um, a recognition of the role of the sommelier, you could say, in Melbourne and general hospitality at the time. I was heavily involved with Sommeliers Australia. We um, uh, brought it national as well at the same time. It was just mainly Victoria and New South Wales. So I was very sort of early days there. So after stepping away from hospitality, I started doing a lot of consulting. So writing wine lists, a lot of training, um, and not necessarily training that Westset format, but more focused on communication. And through there, I was also doing a lot of presenting, hosting of masterclasses at the Good Food and Wine Show back in the day. And that was at the start of the MasterChef phenomenon. Um, Back when, Gary and George and Matt were there and at Good Food and Wine Show at the time, it was quite interesting because there was no the default setting for learning about wine was masterclass. It was death by masterclass, and doing Good Food and Wine Show was fascinating and going, you know, like people would pay $50 or something to sit in front of me and listen to me waffle on about wine, and you're never going to learn everything there was about wine in 30 minutes. So we just sort of tried to make it entertaining. And from there, you would say that that was born the idea of Pinot Palooza of doing why can't you have you know, wine that's so super serious? You don't need to why can't you have a bit of a wine party? And I suppose that from there was built on from Pinot Palooza, and that was like 12 years of running festivals, so on, so on. And then from here now in my role, which jumped on to the next phase, is into my role in getting involved with Wine Victoria, as well as my role at head of special projects, which is such a wonderfully nebulous title at Common State, um, and taking the next step in there. I think
Yeah, that's amazing. Like, it's kind of, do you think it's interesting to reflect on your career journey and think about a lot of the roles that you've had over that time actually didn't exist, like, 5 years previous or 10 years previous. You've not only managed to carve out a little niche, but you've also managed to step into roles that, yeah, didn't exist before.
Well, I think it makes me feel very old, as a starting point. But it's also that sort of the growth and maturity of the wine industry or wine sector, wine
Mm,
community, and and wine and hospitality, they're symbiotic. So the maturity of particular, I'm just through the lens of say Melbourne hospitality, in particular, um, literally was growing side by side with the wine sector. If you look at the types of restaurants that were happening in Melbourne at the time, Movida, Ladro was doing incredible pizza. We were rediscovering this incredible, vast array of different food styles from across the globe. And at the same time, the wine sector was growing up and up because we had such incredible alternate varieties and Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. So there's this, we travel so much in Australia as well. So we would go overseas, we'd bring that back, that enthusiasm and curiosity back. So it grows and grows. And the sommelier, my sommelier path, I still that hospitality anchoring. I still played that with everything that we did at Revel and Pinot Palooza or Mold festivals. But
mm,
even to what I do today, it's very much through the lens of, I say I'm in hospitality first before I say anything that I'm in wine, because wine by default is social. You open a bottle of wine and you share it. So if you frame it through hospitality, what is hospitality? It's people, it's convivial, it's sharing, it's a shared table. So it's that for me is that approach as we grow and evolve, which is exciting to where we are today. Which, despite the weekly newsletters telling you how horrible everything is, it's actually pretty exciting and motivating. Like
mm.
I'm pumped.
Yeah. Well, I love the enthusiasm. And actually, I come from a hospitality background. Like I was running around cafes ever since I could get a job. That was my first
I
job.
know. I was hearing all about the recent Shantae episode podcast last night.
And actually, I think we've told you this, but Courtney was one of my customers when I worked in Cronulla, which is in like southern Sydney, and now we're connected through the Rootlings network in the wine industry, which I just think is crazy. But I would actually love a show of hands. I don't know if you want to put your camera up or put a little emoji in there. Is there any other hospitality kind of trained individuals on the chat? Yeah, I got caught. Yeah,
And yeah,
Ben, you can see. I feel, and Mia, I feel like hospitality really does set you up for long-term success. Having to make that long black extra hot will help you solve any problems.
Well,
Because
that's
you
it,
have
right?
to
Like
do
it's a
that.
cornerstone. Forget about, compulsory military service. It should be compulsory hospitality service. Because if you can't figure out, it teaches you so much. It teaches you multitasking. It also teaches you how to talk to people. And you see the best and probably the worst of people. But it actually, sometimes you've got to shift your service style between one table to the next. So I think that communication part, it was key and critical for hospitality. I couldn't do anything what I do now without that.
Hmm.
It's
We
crucial.
had a webinar about sidestepping in the wine industry last year, and we had Kayla on the chat. So she started off in restaurants. Her parents were chefs. She started off in restaurants, and she now is the assistant vineyard manager over in the Great Southern in WA. And she's like, it is still hospitality because I have to make picking decisions midway through vintage, and I have to think about my, my end product or my consumer or the person in front of me, and I have to switch it up and communicate with them effectively to know about their products. So I think it's really interesting to having that baseline hospitality. But in saying that, even if you don't have that, it's just a skill set that runs alongside the wine industry that you said. So I want to take us back to, Pinot Palooza and the Mold Festival. So it really changed the way people do wine tastings. You move it away from white tablecloths to a high energy, music-led atmosphere. How do you balance fun and education without losing the premium nature of wine as a product?
Yeah, yeah, great question. Again, the whole premise of Pinot Palooza was about you know, was about having a super serious grape variety, but not a super serious environment, and make it accessible, and make it engaging. And whilst it sounds like you were just having a wine party, the thought process behind it was actually hyper detailed. And what if you think about really what it was just turning the music up a little bit. And traditionally, in any trade tasting, there's someone pouring wine and there's someone on the other side. And so many times in masterclasses or whatever, there's this awkward silence. And there's this barrier between the wine and the person. So what we started to find out by just turning it up a little bit was the music helped fill the void and also became a bit of a common denominator. Like regardless of whatever we like or dislike, we could have a really fresh, fun conversation about music. And because we turned it up a little bit, what you found out was that you couldn't actually quite hear what the other one was saying. So you had to lean in. And all of a sudden you're sort of breaking a bit of a barrier of that sort of that table there. So you go, hey, so oh yeah, so this is what we're doing. So it becomes this sort of more interactive guy. And then also, if someone's walking up to the table with a bit of spring in their step, then that's a good thing. Um, but again, like when we started out Pinot Palooza, it was hilarious. It was trying to break the mold a little bit, and what we found is that some people were saying, "Oh, this isn't serious enough. We should have a string quartet playing." I was like, "Well, hang on a minute, mate. You've come to an event called Pinot Palooza. It's kind of in the name. Like, if you're coming to Pinot Palooza and you're expecting classical music, this isn't for you." And I think it was very much about being unapologetic about it because, you know, well, I mean, what was Palooza? I mean, clearly I'm showing like Lollapalooza, again, showing my age. Lollapalooza was set up as a music festival to rebel against the mainstream, and have sort of very much that 90s grunge type element. And for me, Pinot Palooza was that natural thing of going, we are going to rebel against that death by masterclass element at that point where, you know, we just wanted fun. And also at the same time, it was a lot of the winemakers at the time. The very first Pinot Palooza, we had Helen Masters from Murrarunga, we had Nick Mills from Rip On, we had it was Michael Dillon from no sorry, we had guys from Bannockburn, there was Ladder. So it was literally like writing the list of the elite best of the best of Pinot Noir producers at that time. And we invited them, and it was like me writing the best Pinot list I could. And everyone just said yes. And it was just fun because I don't know, if you meet wine people like having fun too. And they don't, when we catch up and talk about wine, it's not in a fucking masterclass or with a white tablecloth and white gloves. It's actually fun and social and engaging. So I was like, well, why don't we just let that go? And and also from the very start, what we found was it was a very attractive in terms of the audience itself was under 35s. And at the time, certain writers who still writing about wine today, were saying that you young people aren't into wine. And I was like, well, that's bullshit. And they said, oh, women don't drink Pinot Noir, they drink Rosé and Sauvignon Blanc. And I was like, that's bullshit. Because 60% of our audience were women. 60% of our audience were under 35, and in the under 35 demographic, 65% were women. I was like, well, people, you know, young people are into wine. They're just not interested in you talking about wine in that way. And I particularly get frustrated still that that whole narrative about young people aren't into wine just drives my head in. I've been told that my entire career, and the same people who are saying it are still writing about wine today. And they were wrong then, and they're still wrong today, and they still waffle on and have get on their soapboxes and talk about the same thing. But I don't know. I just look what, yeah, it was. Yeah, I suppose. But to answer your question is like the last thing wine needs is to make itself more elitism, and in a world of effectively decreasing consumption. Now, I could challenge that thing as well. The last thing we need to do is make it more unattainable. And that's what Palooza was all about. Just making it fun and being welcome, really. Saying, you know, we didn't have any 5-star ratings. We didn't do whatever. We said, here's a glass, go taste, find your favorite. In fact, that's all I asked was like, just go and find your favorite. If you can figure that out, and it's going to be easier the next time you go to a restaurant or a wine bar or a cellar door, you'll have a better idea about what's in front of you.
Now, I recall from the Melbourne Field Day that you brought everyone together at the start of each of the festival days and had a bit of a team briefing.
Yeah.
Can you run everyone through what that was like? Because yeah, I really resonated with some of that
Well, that
brief.
was we started off as a bit of a joke, but it would be said at every single event. It was like if we hear any mention of Beaumet levels, trellising systems, malolactic fermentation, or any other winemaking bullshit, we'll yellow card you. If I hear it again, it'll be a red. Don't tell them about who you are, why you're here, why you love what you're doing, and what's special about your place. Because people connect to people. They don't connect to stainless steel tanks. Tell them a story. You know what? Smile. Start with hello. That's really was the joke, and that always roll their eyes at me. But it was that point of the producers got on board. And what happened was because we were trying to engage with a new audience, and then as the 7 or 8 years down the track, we had a lot of producers would come up to me and go, "Oh, Dan, they're asking me all these really detailed questions." I was like, "Well, answer them. Isn't that great?" Like, but I just don't think you know opening a conversation with this is picked at 13.5 Beaumet, did its primary fermentation in stainless steel, and it was transferred to new French oak. And this was this particular coupe because we like the grain, and then we did a little batonnage and a bit of leaf stirring, and then we transferred it over this, and we aged it for 18 months. So we did all that. Like, you're not telling them anything.
Mm.
You're not telling them, you know, the story as to what they can connect to. And I think that, if anything, was why I said we didn't talk about points. And points have their place, don't get me wrong. But points never speak to a wine's purpose. That never tells you how to use it. I could put 6 96 point wines in front of you and we could all have a different favorite. But what occasion am I using it? What's the utility of it? And who's to say that, you know, 90 point Pinot, when you're sitting with your mates watching the sunset over some hills, is any less of an experience than sitting in a room, hundreds of kilometers away from where it was actually made in a white with a white tablecloth, and then passing judgment that it's 96 points.
Mm.
Tell me which is the better experience, the one that I want.
And I think it's really interesting, actually, a little anecdotal story. When I was out in WA last year for the Rootlings Field Day, my friends took me to LS Merchants out in Margaret River, and they were talking about the bush doof that they have every year. And I was like, that is sick. That I don't know how you get around licensing, or I guess nobody really cares or whatever. But yeah, so they throw this massive bush doof. And then I saw that Katrina Butler from the Halliday Wine Companion just put up their recent scores where it was like 96, 96, 95, 95, 95. And you're like, Wow. Okay. So you've actually got this wine brand that's going out there. They're having fun. I don't know if there's bush dogs across the country. Can you please invite me? Um, and then, but they are backing that up with a serious product. So it's like, oh, okay, you can be really fun and you can also be premium. Those two can
Totally.
exist.
They can coexist. Like that's the best thing. They can. Like and that's okay. Like I mean, I understand points play have a role, and it's very, it is important. So I don't disagree. But it is very key. But however, it's like I'm more interested in how people engage with it and why.
For
Um,
sure.
and make them feel welcome.
For
You
sure.
know,
And I guess just on that point, like I guess when you're in a festival setting, this is what I realized when for the wine brand I work for. So we put the icon up on our banners that people can see, so then they understand that there's a reputation there. But when they come to our stand, we never stand behind the bench. We always come in front,
100%.
and it just
Yep.
breaks down those
Right.
barriers. So they
Totally.
can visually see us that we're reputable and we've won some awards, but then the interaction with them, we don't create that physical barrier.
Oh, 100%. It was always for those producers, we always encourage people to get in front of the stand and not have a barrier. And and funnily enough, they would sell more wine. Very early on, I had a producer once who was like, "I never sell any wine at your event stand. It was really boring." I said, "Well, do you think it has something to do with the fact that you stand behind your stand with your arms
Mm,
crossed, drinking beer, looking like a miserable bastard? You know, it's not my job to sell your wine. My job's to get people in front of you and create an environment that's fun and engaging. The minute that person turns up to your stand, my job's done.
mm,
You know, my job's to fill the room. It's your job to sell your wine and, smile, start with hello, make it more fun. And that's, we after years and of doing it with Palooza, the producers who were part of it, they got it.
yeah,
Like they want to have. And again, if all the nerdy bits, and I look at all the numbers and reports and data and things like that, like wine, this is why I get excited about wine today, is the fact that it's this big shift um, in how people engage. It's becoming it's a new social currency.
it
Like
is.
it's a bit of flexing. Like if they want to have a bit of a story about wine and taking that, showing that with their friends, and there's engagement, and when they talk about the declination of wine or consumption's down, that's a lot of big bulk wine.
Mm,
Now, again, that's a different challenge, and it's been an important part of the Australian wine industry, and we need to help and address and pivot people through that. But I don't know, and but this speaks volumes to the industry, where you've got things that they don't want to hear about it. 20 years ago, when I was on the floor, and my similar generation of similar brethren, we were flagging, hey, just putting it out there, people are moving away from one-dimensional bulk traditional branded wines. They're heading towards light to medium bodied. And then we were told that we didn't know what we were talking about, that we were snobs and we were elitists and all this, and we should just shut up and we should just focus on very big traditional brands. So, so when I hear about this, I was like, oh, people are moving away from these big brands. I'm like, pretty sure we said this 20 years ago. Um, but but that's it's but again, like yourselves, like that's the exciting bit.
mm,
The good people are interested in that educational thing. They're moving away from those sort of box sizes into more sort of lines of story and place and character. That's what we've always wanted, and that if that is going to be, there's more wineries out there. There's more brands out there. There's more engagement, but wines are really in a really exciting place, in particular in Australia and Victoria, obviously. Um, that it will be good, but it's just going to be a bit of a shift.
for sure. Now, for this is for some of the smaller producers that we talked about. So, and especially if, marketing budget's tight or non-existent, but for small producers that can't afford a massive festival stand because it is a big buy-in, what is one thing that they could do to make their direct-to-consumer engagement more exciting?
Show up. It's like anything, right? It's market like again, we never really charged big dollars for events at festivals because it had to be, make it accessible. There's also understanding of working out what's going to work for you. And I love the analogy that if you don't have a lot of money, that means you have to think. And that's where the creative things come. So how you want to do something, whether it's a low investment or a high investment, you've got to show up. Like whatever you do, you've got to show up. So, I used to say this to regions before I was chair, and I'd go, look, oh, we did an event, and they'd say, oh, we did an event and it didn't go very well. It's like, okay, well, what happened? Oh, I didn't really have the resources and we didn't have a lot of time to do it. And so I was like, okay, so you did it half-assed. I was like, okay, yeah, cool. Do you make wine half-assed? And they're like, no. So why the fuck would you expect to do an event or a festival half-assed and expect a great result?
Mm.
Like to do anything, whether it's marketing or whatever, you've got to give it the full attention and commitment, regardless of the spend, and also give it time and consistency. And consistency is probably even is of more value than anything. Um, we always encourage producers to come back and come back into a market and build and build and build, so it becomes this consistency with it. But look, I think whatever you do, whether it be a wine bar takeover or a sell like a bottle shop or retail store takeover, popping up, being in front of people, meeting people, building your database, getting people to sign up. One person, if they hand over their email, is an asset. And whether it's a social media campaign and all that type of things, we talk about cost of acquisition and all those type of things. You can spend a lot of money on it, but it's like anything. You need to give um, as much care and attention and patience to any campaign or any activity that you do, just as you do in your vineyard. If you're in the immediate return on investment game, what the fuck are you doing in wine? We plant vineyards. They take 3, 4 years to get at least some sort of crop, and then for the vineyard to really kick in, it takes about 10 years. We're in the patience game. So I've had some brands go, oh, we did a social media post and we didn't sell any wine. It's like, well, yeah, well, did you get immediate return on investment year one of planting a vineyard? No, but it takes time. But again, it's about capacity. Work out your capacity. And if you do something, then go for it. Like really go for it, and hustle. That hustle is never going to go away. I've got up with a producer the other day, high profile producer. They're still traveling overseas, meeting people, going to events, going to tastings. The hustle doesn't stop. It never does, especially with markets that get more competitive.
Mm, that's for sure.
But show up, really. That's the honest way. Just turn up and be yourself.
Mm, I like that. So we're going to talk about obviously your new role at Common State about tourism and blending that all together. So you're now leading a consultancy spanning wine, tourism, and product development. What is the biggest mistake do you think that regions make when try or brands make when try to attract the ideal wine guest?
A really good question and a really hard question.
Mm,
I think it's also understanding about who the guests you want to attract and understanding this is who we want to attract, but then having an understanding of who actually is our guest. And I think having a very good understanding about who they are is key, and then what sort of activities do they want to actually attract. But if you are attracting, if you want to attract new people, great. Where are they staying? How are they getting there? How do you solve their problem? And also, what sort of financial investment are you asking them to do? Let me answer it this way. Any festival or any event is effectively an exercise in time. From a, you know, from a punter point of view, for a relatively low investment, say take Pinot Palooza as an example, I can buy a ticket, I can go and taste 150 different Pinots from so many different producers in a short period of time for a low investment. From a producer point of view, I could have a standard, say, event. I could see 4,000 or 5,000 people from a capital city. How many days would it take of operation of a cellar door to see 5,000 people from Melbourne to operate? So I get to see 5,000 people for a relatively low investment in a short period of time. So again, I think I said this when caught up with the field days, like one of the biggest challenges anybody has in the world is a lack of time. If you can solve people's time, then that becomes a very, it lessens the barrier to entry. So if I'm going out to a region, it's easy if it's in the dress circle, hour and a half, 2 hours. If I'm starting to go further out, I'm making a commitment. I'm driving. I need accommodation. So even within that, I'm in, I'm down, probably $500, $600. That's before I've even turned up. So, and that's a very big investment. But what is the compelling, what is the payoff to that? People don't mind spending for experiences, 100% they do. But how do you then create an element to keep them coming back? And the
Mm,
good regional events do it really well. Look, Grampians, Grape Estate. Look at what they do out in Rutherglen. It's been consistently year on year. And if anyone's from the Yarra Valley, why isn't there one in the Yarra Valley, please? So I think it's like getting good regional events is key and critical because it brings people out to the regions. But how you market to them, how you solve their problems. Okay, great. I've driven out there, but I don't want to. I want to go to the event and taste wine. Are you offering public transport? Are they commercial? What are the buses? What are those little attention to detail things that you can tackle to make it a bit of a no-brainer? Does that make
mm.
sense?
Absolutely. And like, I reckon this, I'm going to bet some money on it. I think this is the key for the wine industry in the future. But I think our tasting rooms and our cellar doors and our regional experiences have to be family friendly. It is a brand new audience that you can attract. But not only that, is you're breaking down the stigma and the barrier for and I'm not, marketing to children here, but you're making sure that, their parents are drinking wine, they're having a really appropriate time with wine. They're seeing wine as, yeah, not this confusing product that's really hard to understand through the tasting room door. So maybe, here in the Hunter, we've got a bunch of kids' experiences. But yeah, getting them comfortable around wine and the experience of wine too.
Oh, 100%. And also, like when you go to a region, they're not just going for wine. They're
Yeah.
going for beer, they're going to spirits, they're going for distillery, they're going for experiences and hiking and all that. So it becomes very much a regional one as well, seeing it as a community, 100%.
Mm,
Yeah. And someone asked me earlier, going, what does it take to make a festival? It's like, don't build festivals, build communities. Like that's absolutely key. And if you like, and recently I did Eat, Drink, Play Gippsland last year, that was getting all the producers and community on board to act as your advocates, to tell their people, to then create that. Because once you've got the foundation and all the top producers in the region turning up, then that's easy to sell. Without
mm.
them, you can't get them. But yeah, community is everything. Yeah, like is 100%.
Well, that actually leads me perfectly onto my next question about Eat, Drink, Play Gippsland. So you involved multiple councils, multiple tourism bodies, and also multiple brands as well. How do you navigate the politics of the place to ensure everyone still feels represented and that their brand is there and being shown while creating a larger, cohesive regional brand?
Yeah, I think it's over, and that's the thing. Like that was Adrian Play Gippsland was supported by South Gippsland Shire Council, Destination Gippsland, Wine Gippsland, and with support from Visit Victoria. Um, so as well as having we would do the food and drink side, and then Rhett and Ada McLaren from the Hills Are Alive group, who do Ocean Sounds, they're doing a lot of the music component. So there's a lot of different stakeholders. But what it was like pretty much selling a vision to go, right, okay, this is what it's going to take. And so, look, absolutely, we need to manage all that, but also sort of manage people's expectations and going, look, at the end of the day, there's always risk doing any event or festival. It comes down to the weather, it comes
Mm,
down to all these other factors. But I think it's sort of having a clear understanding, going, what is the capacity of what we are trying to do, and also, but also being realistic. Events and festivals, it becomes a numbers game. And I used to joke and say, look, you can have anything you want at a festival as long as you're funding it or paying for it. Someone's paying for it somewhere along the line. So yeah, what is the cost of entry for the person what is that price for them to get there? So that was a big discussion. What do you charge people to turn up? And then even I think the biggest difference there for Eat Drink Play Gippsland was like having the difference between a festival and a food and wine market. So having to clearly differentiate between the two. It's like, no, we do all these community festivals and they're all great. That's cool, but they have their place. And but what we want to build is you know very much a branded experience to make it easy for people. But I
Mm.
think the biggest one was to try and get the producers on board and have them well represented from across the region. And then once you've got them on board, how do you talk about them? How do you market them? And then once as soon as we were doing a lot of content around them, and they would effectively share it to their market. So you were building this awareness piece organically as well as paid, and then at the same time, really be a bit big headed or dog headed, going, guys, this is the vision we're going. Um, you know, we were talking before offline about death by committee. At the end of the day, someone's got to make the decision. And I think we were lucky between Rhett and I. We had quite a very clear vision about what we wanted to achieve, and then it's a case of working backwards to make sure everyone, we helped everyone come along, bring them along on the journey, and that comes a lot with a lot of talking, a lot of communication. Funnily enough, was everything, and just managing everyone's expectations.
Mm. Now let's kind of pivot from that because obviously, very sound, and we'll talk about some of that strategic leadership that you've got going on because it sounds like you've used those skills, that you've learned in hospitality through all of this process. And let's talk about your role at Wine Victoria. So, as chair, what's your job description look like, and how did you get involved?
Well, that's how I got involved probably first. I've been on the board of Wine Victoria for about going on almost 4 years now. Um, I joined close friend of mine, Angie Bradbury, was the previous chair. If anyone knows her, she's a bit of a force to be reckoned with, and she's been a long-term friend and mentor of mine. And as I was sort of going with in my role with sort of looking for other things, she would tap me on the shoulder. She's like, "All right, come on, mate, it's time to step up." And I was like, "Okay, yep, yep, okay, no worries." So I applied to join the board, and that was a massive learning curve. So it literally within I think it took me about 12 months to figure out exactly what Wine Victoria did, and so much things that I didn't know. And part of at the same time that I joined the board, Stephanie Duberton, who was the then chair, who stepped down from chair to become the CEO. We joined the same time, and we both come from a comms background. We had no idea all of these things that Wine Victoria did. We really need to work on a comms strategy to start telling people about it. But also, understand that Wine Victoria, it was we're a volunteer board. I'm a volunteer chair. Our operating budget is absolute bugger all. We're talking a couple $100,000 a year. For comparison, the operating budget of Barossa Valley is about $1 million. So, that's all they fail. The Clara is like three-quarters of a million. So we are tiny in comparison. So we only can do what we do through grants and government funding. So for me, it was like wanting to join the board and give back and play an active role. And at a time when the industry was going through a lot of challenge, it was like, okay, well, the only way we can either sit on the sidelines and point fingers and bitch and moan about how shit everything is, or we can roll our sleeves up and get on with it, turn up, be the change that we want to see. And for me, I think that's been that whole. I hope that in kind of what I get to do is like play that sort of active role or cheerleader. So back to my role as chair is that I'm chair of the board, so I manage the board meetings. I've got one on Wednesday, so they chair that meeting, make sure it all runs from a governance point of view, making sure that we do with the minutes and have updates from the various activities and funding things that we have. So very much sort of above the line, and whereas the below the line, sort of the more operational, very much is Steph and the CEO from the day-to-day running of the of Wine Victoria. So you have those two um, different approaches. So I'm more sort of work closely with the board in terms of strategy, and whereas Stefan, as the CEO, implements the strategy and runs the sort of daily operations. So in that part of that role is, I spend a lot of time with government, dealing with agriculture ministers and the global with Global Vic team for the trade and enterprise ministers. We just got a couple of new ministers in Melbourne, which is great. But I very much in my chair role, I see myself as the cheerleader. Um, I'm to get everyone pumped up, motivated. Um, you know, catch up with as many people as we possibly can, have conversations, um, listen, a lot of listening, but then help try and navigate the state and representation. Well, Wine Victoria is a representative body of Victorian wineries, and we work really hard to do that. Work closely with the regional bodies. We've got a regional forum next week where all the regional bodies we get together and catch up. But yeah, it's very much advocating, cheerleading, being present, and being available.
Now, for this next question, it's a two-parter. The first one is, so young people obviously aren't really well represented on state and regional association boards at this current time. Why would a young person, do you think, why should a young person get involved with either their regional association, their state association, any association?
Why?
Mm,
Oh, because you get to shape the future that you're going to inherit. Really. Um, I strongly encourage, I think I said in the last kind of course up, is like get involved and agitate. Um, and I think I'm very much aware of that, of the need to hear younger voices. Again,
mm,
from that experience that I said before, when I was flagging 20 years ago, saying, "Hey," to the leaders at the time, people are moving away from one-dimensional, boring wines and heading towards more light to medium-bodied Pinot Chardonnay and away from big brands. A whole generation of some said that, and they were ignored. And gee, don't we find ourselves in a bit of a shit situation at the moment? So how do we avoid that? You guys are all of you on that sort of front line and have different perspectives and different experiences and a different view and different lens of how you see these challenges. So we need to ensure that is articulated and listened to. So in particular, as a bare line, um, joining the regional association is absolutely key because you get to start to get your eye in. Even if you're on that committee, you don't say anything, you show up, and you'll be learning a lot of how that actually works, and because that will give you that experience to keep on going. Then to go, it might be like joining the tech committee of Wine Victoria, and eventually to the point where apply to join the board. But again, implementing elements to encourage that. We've got a board meeting on Wednesday where we're getting two. You may have seen us seeking expressions of interest to join two subcommittees on the people and visitor economy, where we really want to hear from rootlings, next croppers, future leaders, and from a diverse group of people within our sector, because we want to have that, and that's just not like a death by committee type thing, but that committee will be reporting directly to the board and even to have that experience is key. And also one thing you know, part of that as well, like, also sometimes it's like this element of confidence, to having the confidence to be part of that, and how um, when you're in your peer group, something that I'm very aware of, and I remember this from my experiences, when you're in your peer group, you have a confidence to speak up, and because it feels safe, and that's really important. And sometimes when you take yourself out of that comfort zone and you're in a different environment, you close up, and that's understandable. But it's really, what I hope what we can do, and so for everyone, is we need to encourage safe places or encouraging of places for people to actually speak up and say their point and to be curious enough. And I hope, if anything, we're quite lucky in Victoria with the board that we have, is we have got a curious board, and we are open-minded, that we know we don't have all the answers, but honestly, the best way is just to get involved. And if you're going to winemaker, the bare minimum participation is joining your regional association. And to take it to the next step is just getting involved,
mm,
turning up, you
yeah,
know,
turning up to meetings, it's not that hard.
turn up, read the minutes.
I'd also like to say as well, like, because you obviously said Angie Bradbury had kind of tapped you on the shoulder and said you're ready for this. It's been actually for majority of my committee roles that I'm on that somebody else has suggested my name. So I think it's really important to note that if you are interested in these opportunities, you need to speak to people around you. You need to speak to your boss. You need to speak to your mentors. You need to speak to your peers and say, I'm actually really interested in doing this. I don't really know how I'm going to get there right now, but I just wanted to let you know that if there's an opportunity for me to jump on something, that I'm really keen for it because then all of a sudden the doors will start opening. So I think that's actually really important. You can't just be like, oh, I really want to be on a committee. Okay. Like it's not going to come to you. Sometimes you do need people advocating for you. And then when the call out does go out, you can then say. There was also a really important point that Liz Riley made last year in a webinar. She's like, you don't just jump into like a state committee or a state board. Like she started off doing the netball committee or the play group committee for her kids and stuff, just to figure out how they all ran and how that kind of came about. So then she felt more confident to put her hand up in meetings and so on and so forth. And now she's obviously on the board of Wine Australia amongst many different boards. So it's like if you are interested, you do need to be a little bit vocal for yourself and actually advocate for what you need.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be a genius. You just have to, again, turn up, read the meeting minutes, and actually like have something to say.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the thing is like we even still to this day we people like want to join the board of Wine Victoria and we're like, are you part of your regional association?
Yeah,
As a, have you been part of your regional association at all? No. Okay, well, start there.
yeah,
Because we used to get like, at a board level, it things are happening fast. And to get up to speed, it does take a little bit of time. We don't have a lot of time to do that. And the more experience you have in those, um, and again, with Liz, quite 100% Liz on that, is it's like having that experience from a committee level, whether it's a tech committee or, an actual, state or, sorry, regional body or things like that, that will help get your eye in. And Courtney made a point about, we can't be what we can't see. And I think that's a really big thing. And I think that's hopefully what we try to do with the board that we have at Wine Victoria. It's a diverse board. I think we're actually, yeah, it is a diverse board from different experiences and different ranges, and also encourage all of them to be present and to be vocal and advocates. But again, we want to in Victoria to really lead that and encourage that because and that's just not and so many people say, oh, we want to hear young voices and then completely ignore them. It's like, no, like we want you in there, we want you advocating for yourselves and agitating because again, you, the reason we're in the shit right now, a lot of the shit right now is because people didn't listen and they held their opinions tightly. Whereas what we do need to do is we hold the challenges lightly and know that we don't have all the answers. So to have other voices and experiences through, like again, for many board meetings, as I said, that listening, it's a huge thing. I listen a lot because I don't have all the answers. No one does.
yeah, that's for sure. Well, we're going to move into some quick fire questions after some heavy conversation. And then we're going to open the floor up as well. All
Great.
right. So I'm going to ask these questions. You can obviously give me a full-blown answer if you want, or you can just leave us in mysteriousness and not answer.
Is this where I
All
say
right.
Grace Tame is a legend? Just
Oh,
so,
yeah,
yeah, great. Okay, cool.
always. All right. Pinot Noir or Chardonnay?
Pinot,
Wine bar or fine dining restaurant?
wine bar,
Digital media or traditional media?
digital. However, oh God, that digital. But
Okay,
traditional media is going to be more and more, would you believe, actually more and more in the world of AI. I could
I
go on for
agree.
a tangent on that. How they actually track, how they actually track legitimacy and importance. They rank traditional outlets more than digital anyway. But digital first, yes.
I agree. Structured tasting or free pour party?
I think we know the answer to that one.
Structured tasting,
Masterclass. Yeah,
obviously.
no, free party, 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 party.
Regional focus or own brand identity?
That's look, both can coexist. Both can coexist. You are. if anything, you go regional because you're part of, if you put the name of the region on your label, then regional focus. But I think two can coexist.
Okay, I know I already know the answer to this one, but I'm still going to ask. German shorthaired pointer or Kelpie?
Pointer. I have a
Re
pointer for those who don't know.
Riesling or Cabernet?
Riesling.
Okay, this one I reckon is going to be hard. Data-driven decisions or gut feeling creative?
Again, you can't have one without the other. You've got to take the data and how you interpret it and then go on your gut. After, again, a project that I'm currently working on, Courtney, is very much based on a lot of data and taking that information and distilling it. And then at the end of the day, you're going to make a gut call. Data doesn't give you insights necessarily. It gives you data. How you interpret it is something different.
Podcast or book?
Podcast. I spend a lot of time in the car, and
That's
I would
fair
love
enough.
the idea. I love the idea of sitting down and reading a book. I just don't have time.
Fair enough. And I mean, if you're in the car, it makes a lot of sense. All right, so that's the end of the formal questions, I guess, and you've done well with the rapid fire. I'm going to open I'm going to open it to the floor to the Rootlings. You can either, put your hand up and ask some questions in here, or the chat box is open if you want to take a second to ask a question. I
Hit
know.
me.
Oh, Courtney, go for it.
Hi, Dan.
Hi.
Hi. Um, so you are the chair of WineBic. You are probably very aware of the, things that people in the industry complain about or are worried about, but you're also aware of all the positive things. So what opportunities do you think there are for the Victorian wine industry? Say, like, I don't know, in the next like 5 or 10 years, what's something that could define success for Victorian wines?
I'm insanely excited for Victorian wines. I feel like you know, historically, our diversity of grape varieties and styles has been almost a disadvantage, particularly with overseas markets. But funnily enough, with the shifting tides and winds and changing winds, our diversity is now our strength. Has always been our strength and is becoming more and more into it. So, particular, we see that with a shift to more light to medium bodied styles. Fantastic. That's 100% what we do. Pinot and Chardonnay, happy days. Spirits culture being driven by particular Prosecco in the King Valley, 100%. And in particular, also really good everyday drinking wines. I look at the Murray Darling and say, that has the potential to be the wine bowl of Victoria. Of really good everyday drinking wines. Looking at climate appropriate grape varieties, we have that innovation there. Like that for me gets me very excited. And again, I look at so that's both from a wine point of view, but also from a people point of view. Oh, I mean, aside from you Rootlings, having met you a number of times, it's pretty inspirational. Every single time I come away from talking with you, I come back even more excited. The next corporate group who we spoke with last year, seeing them, like honestly, I sometimes don't often I've having to present to them a couple of times. I don't normally get intimidated by speaking with people, but I was like, holy shit! Like I got real nervous in one time talking with them because I was like, you guys are just like wow, like very exciting. And then you look at the Future Leaders course. So, and then through the other channels, which we've got through WineVic, through our bursary to get people through the company directors course. So I see it from a people point of view. I feel that pipeline of, it's such a wanky term, but a pipeline of talent that we have, if as long as those is accessible, then fantastic. Stylistically, in terms of where the trends are going from, again, light to more medium-bodied styles, particularly internationally. I'm pretty excited. That's not to say there's still not challenge ahead. It's super hard. Like, I mean, just look at this vintage, right? It was
Mm. Yeah, it's been a shocker.
a bingo card of shit. So, but that aside, from a macro point of view, we also got a good relationship with the Victorian government as well. Like, albeit everyone opinion that may have about our state government, they really care about the industry, and they hear, and yeah, like yeah, they really do care. So we're pretty lucky in that point of view as well.
Cool. Thank you.
I wouldn't be chair of Wine Victoria if I didn't believe it.
Yeah.
And I don't know where everyone is from in this meeting, but if you're from outside of Victoria, I would 100% subscribe to their industry newsletter. I get it, and I am blown away with the amount of work that they're doing. And I'm yet to forward it onto my state association, but you can just see the breadth of work that actually goes into it. Um, so I would advise you to just sign up so you get a real understanding of what a proactive and killing it state association looks like. Um, if I've just got a quick question, and again, please, if anyone else has, put your hand up. But like, okay, so what's your advice for not wine industry is famously social, like extroverts and whatnot, but not everyone's a natural networker. Not everyone is extroverted. What's your tips or advice for a young professional trying to build their profile in a room of extroverts or industry heavyweights?
I consider myself an introverted extrovert. For someone who runs festivals for a living, the amount of energy it would take for me to do that, I have to. It's why I live in Gippsland, because I need to run away and recharge. But you know, sometimes the most interesting people in the room are the quiet ones in the corner. Um, this is going to sound really wanky, but Angelo Gaia said this story to me. I know that's the biggest name drop, like flexing there, but he said, the Nebbiolo is like the quiet person in the corner, or Cabernet Sauvignon was like the big bold personality. They're very bright. Everyone that gets attracted to them, and they talk. They can command the room, and they dominate the conversation, all that. But then you've got the person in the corner who's the a little bit quiet. You kind of look at them and go, "Shit, they're interesting. They're observing everything." I think, and then you sort of go up and have a conversation with them, and I think, yeah, and then you start to you have it comes at a little bit of time to get to know them, and they become your best mate, and they're probably the most insightful. So I think anything we need a diverse group of voices in our industry, and sometimes find the forum of which you're most comfortable in. If that isn't, if you're having to go somewhere and you don't feel like um, speaking up in that forum. And again, there's a lot of personalities in wine who, a lot of ego. Um, but whatever you need to do to help build your confidence, and I should say that there's a big difference between confidence and ego. I think we all need to sort of build our confidence up. Whatever you need to do, whether it's writing an email or something else afterwards, or if you need time to consider your thoughts, that's okay. Just find the forum in which you're most comfortable, because we do want to hear from everyone as much as we possibly can, and sometimes that takes time. Um, Imposter syndrome. I'm the chair of Wine Victoria. Like, what the fuck? Like, I have imposter syndrome all the time. So I feel it regularly, and I think I've learned to understand that that imposter syndrome is your humility. It's a humility check, and without it, then you've got ego, and ego can lead to a whole range of other things. So it's okay to be quiet and considered. And if I see, I'd like to think I'm a bit of an observer. You can always find the quiet ones in the room, just like judging, show judging. Beware the airbrush in the wine shows. Seek the quiet ones, because they're often the best ones.
I love that. All right. Just as we hit 8:30, were there any last minute questions for Dan? And again, maybe you've got something drafted in the chat box that you're ready to press send on. There's no such thing as a bad question. You actually can't see people typing, but well, that's fine. Um, Dan, I'd just like to thank you so much on behalf of the Rootlings Network for not only giving your time tonight, but you've actually been actively giving it from the beginning. When we started the national program, back at early last year, Dan was one of the first people that took an appointment with me, was wanting to hear what this network was about, and has actively championed this network from the get-go. So it's been an absolute delight to have you on here. And chatting to young people from around the country, chatting to people in Victoria as well. So we're just so grateful for your time, your effort, and your energy.
My pleasure, team, and everyone. If you've again, I'll make sure to circulate my contact details. If you've got any other question or anything like that, shoot me a note. If I happen to miss it for any reason, send another one. Don't just send one and forget about it. Hustle, hustle till you get an answer. But again, please just reach out if you need anything. Yeah, please let me know.
And even if we're not from Victoria, right, that's okay.
Of course, honestly, the more young people from any other state, we need it I'm fiercely Victorian and Australian, so uh, we we've got a great community, um, particularly with our friend, and we work closely with the other states as well, obviously. But absolutely nothing I like more than agitation in the positive agitation in the wine industry. So get out there and be part of it.
And I like how you've turned it from just agitate to positively agitate.
Positively agitate.
I like it.
Well,
Well,
it's
Dan,
like be the change. Be the change, team. Be the change.
sounds amazing. Well, Dan, thank you once again. Thank you guys for joining us. Our next session in a month's time is about persuasion in the wine industry. So using your stories to get what you want, whether that be, a job opportunity, a salary increase, or maybe a spot on the Wine Victoria board. You can use that. And then after that, our next happy hour, we've got two Victorians taking up the spot again. We will have Katrina Butler and Anna Webster from the Halliday Wine Companion joining
Great.
us for a double session. So that will happen in June, the month
Fantastic.
we're
Amazing
so
people. That don't miss that one. And it's fantastic. They're doing great things there.
yeah, and Katrina is now the general manager, so and
So
as well as
good.
the tasting room manager. So it'll be interesting to see how her job's changed in the last few months. But thank you all once again. This will be live on the Rootlings Network YouTube at some point, and have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.